All editions, revisions, and related resources for this topic will be included in a playlist in the description. Check those out below. Hey, I'm Joe, and I'm going to tell you how to fact check things. So you found some information online and you want to know if it's true. Well, that depends on a lot of things. First rule of fact checking is that proving something true is hard. Like very hard. But proving something false, way easier. So let's just try to do that. First of all, you have to ask, who is this information coming from? Is it coming from an account or a website like the Babylon Bee or the Onion? Those are parody accounts which are made exclusively to pump out false information. But it's for comedy, it's satire. So it's okay. It's just not true. So no, Nintendo is unfortunately not giving out free samples of Pikmin meat. The next debate will not be held via soup can. And the Biden campaign did not sell fly swatters after the first presidential debate.
No, that's true.
It is. That part's true. There are also a lot of parody accounts on like Twitter, for example, that are basically the same thing. That includes things like at Disneyland to go, which pretends like it's the Disneyland official feed, and at VeggieFact, which claims to be an official source of VeggieTales facts. Also not true. So surprisingly, yes, diarrhea is not a veggie fact. But then you also have to ask yourself, is it coming from a notoriously dishonest organization, like say the North Korean government, or EA? Chances are they are lying, or at least like being misleading, saying something, they're not saying the whole truth. Other kinds of sources can be a lot harder to parse. If it's like a stranger or a politician, random person on Facebook, or a hobo playing a ukulele, you might not be able to tell whether or not what they're saying is true at all. But here are some things that you can do. If it is, for example, something that has been making the rounds on social media, then it might be something that has already been researched and fact-checked by a fact-checking website. In which case, you have struck gold because they have already done 95% of your work for you. Snopes is one of the most popular fact-checking websites of this variety, but also gets a whole lot of flack for being biased. If you're one of those who is worried about that, then I have 3 solutions for you. The first is the Wikipedia method. I say that because teachers are always like, Wikipedia is not a real source of information. Well, if you just look at the very bottom, you can see all the sources of their information. In the same exact way on Snopes, you can just look at their own sources. They cite every website and source that they use to check whether or not these things are facts. So you can fact check the fact check. Scroll all the way down, look at the links, read it yourself. Now you've done the fact check. See for yourself if you agree with them or not. The second option is to flail around screaming that no one should ever be able to fact check you because fact checking is inherently censorship and you should be able to say whatever you want, whenever you want, without anyone ever questioning you. And the third option is to cross-reference their findings with other fact-checking websites. So you've got a whole lot of options here. You have factcheck.org, mediabiasfactcheck.com, politifact.com, and quite a few others. For some less political topics, you can even go to some online forums and look at different sources there. Reddit has their own sort of pseudo fact-checking forum called r/isitb. See, I got you there. I don't actually say bad words. You thought I did though. You thought I did. I don't say those words. I just say, I'll do it again. This is a place where you can just ask, is the thing that I've heard of true or not? And anyone can just come in, have a discussion, and answer the question. Is this baloney? Is it not? Why? And you can just kind of have a discussion about it. It's great. So just cross-reference what these different websites and forums say, and you'll find yourself closer to the truth. Which brings us to our next rule of thumb, which is cross-referencing. Cross-reference, cross-reference, crisscross applesauce the heck out of this every article out there. The more you check, the better off you will be. The fewer you check, the more vulnerable you will be to misinformation. As an example, let's say that there was a rumor going around that Swiss rolls were illegal in Switzerland, because how dare they take the name of the Swiss in vain? There's like a million different blog posts and articles and posts about this, but when you read through them, you find that every single one is referencing the same single resource. Like, there's not a bunch of different resources verifying this. There's basically one. That's what all the other resources are pointing to. And that resource is just some random journalist from Illinois who said something in a newspaper about it right next to an article talking about how Billy Bob 40 loops in his pick-em-up truck in the parking lot. Meanwhile, a lawyer in Switzerland just caught wind of this rumor, and so he posts a link online on his social media of every single law and just legislature of Switzerland ever. He says, this isn't a thing. Swiss rolls aren't ever mentioned here. This is the situation, right? You have a million resources out there that all are pretty garbage, and you have one resource that actually has the truth. You look at more articles, you're more likely to find that one single gem of truth. And that's basically all cross-referencing does for you. It just makes you more likely to find that little gem of truth in the haystack that is garbage misinformation. Alternatively, you have situations like what we had in DC back when the president had his photo op, people there, including journalists, passerby, protesters, churchgoers, and of course the president and then law enforcement. But of course there was no consensus on any of the details at all. Some people said that there was tear gas being thrown, but then officials said that there was none. That's a lie. Then some people started saying that it was technically not tear gas, but it was just something that was similar in composition and function. Still others said that there was tear gas, but it was justified anyway because people were being violent. Yet still others say that it was completely unjustified because they were being peaceable and unprovoking. But then some people say that some people deserved it because they were being violent and provoking, but then other people who were there did not deserve it because they were just innocent bystanders like church staff. Some people said there was rubber bullets, other people said there was not. Some people said that Trump just jumped into the crowd, summoned a shard blade and started hacking away at the audience. Others claimed it was a turkey leg. That last part wasn't actually a thing. Let me just... I spent hours cross-referencing a million different articles just trying to piece together what actually did happen until I finally got to a place where I felt like the idea I had was like somewhat trustworthy, but even then I'm still not certain that all the details are correct. And regardless of what you gleaned from that whole mess, one thing that is clear is that no one source was really clear on the full picture on what happened. In such situations, the truth is often kind of strewn about between all sorts of different perspectives and sources and things like that, and cross-referencing is your only option. Heck, even the story of Jesus was told from 4 different perspectives because each point of view offered something different. Different people remember different things stand out to each one of them. It varies depending on what is important to each person. And a very good note, social media posts do not count as sources, at least not reliable ones. Like, Facebook is notorious for misinformation. People who I have seen, and I know you've seen it, will share things that aren't true just in case it could be true. But the thing is, people don't know that you're doing it just in case. They just see something, and if they trust you, they're just gonna believe it. If it seems baffling to you, that's because it is. It's baffling. Twitter often seems like it has a lot less misinformation, and a lot of times it does, but it also just has a whole different dynamic. It has a different audience, a different demographic. If you want a good example, here is a great example of the different kind of demographic that Twitter's user base attracts versus Facebook. But in my totally anecdotal experience, the false information, the misinformation that is on Twitter, which does exist, there is misinformation on Twitter, it's not invincible to that, is just a lot harder to identify. On Facebook, I tend to see the same tactics used over and over and over. You know, copy and paste this message or else Ruby Goldberg's face will haunt your toast. You got memes that are devoid of any kind of source or anything, claiming that Winston Churchill was actually Korean if you look at the history book. Meanwhile, on Twitter, they just seem a little bit more clever about the kind of misinformation that they spread. 1, you have people with claims about their own experience. These people are very often genuine about what they're saying. They believe what they're saying is true, but that does not mean that they aren't accidentally spreading misinformation. For many people, blaming others is a defense mechanism to cope with whatever emotional distress or anxiety you're in, which is totally understandable. It's a normal human response, but it's a problematic one for finding out what's true. A really good example of this is this video that got shared to Twitter when the protests earlier this year hit their peak. And it shows what the person recording seems to believe is police officers being caught red-handed vandalizing their own vehicle so as to make the protesters look bad. And it looks pretty clear-cut, doesn't it? They're just smashing the window in. That's what I thought until I caught wind of another answer that came with its own video. Same exact car, same exact spot, you can see it on the crosswalk, was actually destroyed earlier by other people already. Police officers actually, in truth, were just getting rid of the windshield so they could drive the car away. And the guy recording the video didn't know, he just walked up and saw them doing this. It looked like they were vandalizing their own car. And I don't blame him because That's what it looked like. That's what I believed when I first saw the video. And this is why fact checking is so important. You know all those scenes in movies where you have just this little Susie walking into the house. She sees her husband with his hand in the cookie jar and a chocolate over his mouth.
This is not what this looks like.
And inevitably, it's one of two things. Either it's exactly what it looks like and he's just terrible at covering it up, or some absurd hijinks ensued earlier, which put him in this exact situation that makes him look terrible. And it seems silly and nonsensical, but no, this absurdity actually happens sometimes. The truth can be stranger than fiction. It really can be. And I want to take a minute to talk about a second kind of person talking about their own experience on Twitter. And that's the kind of person who is not a person at all. Not cats, not aliens, robots. Artificial intelligence. Because unfortunately, other governments and organizations and people have realized that they can utilize this kind of misunderstanding, this kind of misinformation, and weaponize it against us. They use it to incite panic and fear and confusion in people in other countries. And I experienced this firsthand. There was this whole deal with the hashtag DC Blackout. In short, hackers and botters went and pretended to be people in DC going to these protests, claiming that there's some weird social media blackout. They can't call people, they can't go online. They had to go to their broadband internet connection in order to post anything because their phones weren't working, blah, blah, blah. And so they were worried about their friends who were over at the protest. These, of course, were hackers. There weren't real people who actually had these concerns. So that would have been easily disproven, right? You just have real people who are there just say, no, that's not happening. Everything's fine. Hunky dory. So these hackers and botters got out their book of tricks. And they went all the way to the back, to the oldest trick in the book, and they used reverse psychology to make their claims seem true. Now, how they did this? They went out and they spammed hundreds of posts on other accounts, responding to their initial claims, and they all said the exact same thing, word for word, copy-pasted, saying this: everything is fine here in DC, nothing to worry about, stop spreading fake news. And of course, when you have two different opposing viewpoints, right? You have people saying things are going wrong, and then you have a million copy-pasted spam posts in response. These are the ones that are going to be looking a little bit more fishy. So you're going to believe these ones. By playing devil's advocate in the most suspicious way possible, they validated their own made-up rumor. And the result was people believed that this crisis was real. It caused panic. And to be fair, it worked to an extent. I myself was panicking. I had to take a walk because all I could find online, this was fresh when I found it, all I could find online were more of these posts, more of these like people freaking out, and there was even like normal people joining in because they thought it was funny. Like, guys, come on. Don't join a misinformation campaign for funsies. Don't do that. It wasn't until hours later when I found some other sources on Reddit of all places where people started saying, no, it's still going, it's fine, there's no blackout. And eventually that truth came out, and the internet providers even posted graphs showing there was never a blackout, everything's fine, everyone came back, I'm just a dummy dum-dum. Despite my efforts, I failed at my fact checking. At least at first I did, later I found out the truth. And I'll likely fail again because there is money to be made in misinformation. War isn't just happening with guns and bombs, it is happening on the internet right now. There are governments and people and organizations who are quite literally plotting to confuse you and lie to you. They're using tactics to manipulate the election in both directions. Okay, I'm not being a conspiracy theorist like, oh, one person's being biased because of foreign campaigns. No, it's happening on both ends. There are countries who don't want certain people in the White House, but there are other countries who do want them in the White House. So these campaigns are going in both directions. All that to say, fact checking isn't easy. And if you think it is, you've probably fallen prey to a lot of it. Don't overestimate your ability to see through stuff like this. Stay humble and keep an open mind. At this point, I've gone over most of the ins and outs that you need to know, but here are some helpful tools to help you get through it a little easier. Thanks to the wonderful thing that is Photoshop, we don't just get the blessing of minion memes, but it also means photos are a lot harder to verify. So one great thing to add to your tool belt is the reverse image search. Go to images.google.com and upload the picture in question, and that will let you search the internet using a photo rather than keywords. Take this astounding photo, for example. This is a real photo that was shared on my timeline by my friends. I am not joking. The world's largest tortoise. Seems real to me. 59 feet tall. That looks 59 feet. Not 15 feet. Don't measure that though. Don't. And only 800 pounds, man. That is a fraction of the weight of that car just behind it. For being 59 feet tall, that's pretty light. Things made of helium. Okay, so what you're gonna wanna do is you wanna right click and hit save. Or if you can't do that, hit the Windows key, Shift, and S at the same time. That will bring up the clipping tool. You can click and drag a little box and copy the picture to the clipboard. You should see a little notification on the right. Click on that, save it, and then you can upload it to the reverse image search that I mentioned earlier. And now you can do some fact checking, and you can see one of the first results is Snopes, one of the fact checking websites I mentioned earlier. And interestingly, what we find is this is unfortunately, disappointingly, not the world's largest tortoise. This is a movie prompt from the 2006 film Gamera the Brave. Whole thing is on YouTube. Haven't watched it, kind of want to though. Now, if the post you're wondering about includes a video, then you might think that that is irrefutable evidence. Wrong. It is similarly becoming harder and harder to believe. Captain Disillusion is another YouTuber who spends a lot of time debunking video hoaxes and going behind the scenes to show how they might have produced these kinds of effects in the first place. I suggest you check him out because a lot of these things are actually either promotional ads that are meant to catch your attention, publicity stunts, or just randos having fun experimenting with VFX. So no, this tiny drone phone holder thing, that's not real. Probably the most worrying aspect for the future of fact-checking is deepfakes. We now have machine learning AI that can be used in order to recreate what a person looks like almost perfectly on another video template. So you can have videos like this where you have the Avengers and the Wizard of Oz, or Tom Holland and Robert Downey Jr. playing the actors from Back to the Future. These are deepfakes. They're not actually there. And it looks almost flawless. There's even deepfakes for voices now too. There's an entire YouTube channel just doing the president's voice, and it is scary good.
Rain is a deadly liquid that falls from the sky. It floods our cities and makes gremlins multiply like you wouldn't believe.
Now, does this mean that fact-checking is hopeless? No. What it means is that we need to prepare ourselves while things are still decipherable. Hey, this is me from the future. One thing I forgot to mention is that all of these things are red flags that you can use to help you recognize when something might be fake. But on the other hand, while it's good to have a healthy dose of skepticism, try not to let that turn into an untrusting sort of cynicism. We can be confident about some things, and even biased sources are sometimes just being honest. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. All things in moderation, including skepticism. For the good of yourself and all those around you, do not share things without checking first to see if they're true. Don't believe everything you read. Give yourself a little bit of grace, and we'll all get through it. If you have any tools or resources for fact-checking that you think I should know about, let me know in the comments and I may include those in a follow-up video later on. Do feel free to share this with your factually impaired friends and family. Hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe for more tutorials. Let me know what else you want to know how to do. Like if you liked it, don't if you don't. Adios.